History is a narrative. It is a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos. And the narrative of 1453 is one of the cleanest, most definitive stories in human civilization. It is a story of endings and beginnings. It is the story of a young, brilliant 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed the Conqueror, fueled by prophecy and ambition, achieving the dream that had eluded his ancestors for 1,000 years. It is the story of a dying, stubborn, magnificent empire, the last remnant of Rome, making its final heroic stand. It is the story of the end of the Middle Ages and the birth of the modern world. It is a story of cannons that shattered walls and ambition that shattered an empire. We know this story. We teach this story. We see its echoes every time we look at the Istanbul skyline. Not a lie in what happened. The walls fell, the Sultan conquered, the emperor died. Those are the facts. But it is a lie, by omission, a profound, calculated 500-year-old omission. This clean narrative, this story of a brilliant victor and a noble loser, only works because of a ghost at the feast of conquest. Her name was Theodora. She was a princess. She was 16 years old, and her fate became the single most dangerous political secret of the 15th century. This isn't a story about what happened to her. You can find that story in dark corners of the internet, a tale of tragedy, obsession, and brutality. But that story misses the point. This is the story of why. Why she had to be erased. Why her memory was so toxic, so politically radioactive, that she wasn't just murdered by the conqueror, she was systematically forgotten by her own people. This is a 10,000-word investigation into the Theodora Conspiracy, a conspiracy of silence, a story that proves history is not just written by the victors. Sometimes it is forged by the calculated, desperate silence of the vanquished. To understand why one 16-year-old girl had to vanish, you must first understand the world that was about to vanish with her, the world of 1450. The Byzantine Empire of 1450 was not the empire of Justinian or Basil the Bulgar Slayer. It was not the glittering multi-continental power that had once held Rome, Egypt, and Jerusalem. It was, to be blunt, a corpse waiting for a burial. It was no longer an empire. It was a single city-state plus a small territory in the Peloponnese of Greece. It was a city of ghosts living in the shadow of its own magnificent past. The population had collapsed from a peak of 500,000 to perhaps 50,000. Farmers plowed fields inside the ancient land walls because so much of the city was empty, reclaimed by nature. The Byzantines called themselves Romaioi, Romans. They were, in their minds, the direct, unbroken line from Augustus Caesar. But they were a sick man of Europe long before the Ottomans inherited that title. They were bankrupt. Their army was a phantom, reliant on a few thousand professional soldiers and, crucially, mercenaries from the West. Mercenaries from Venice and Genoa who demanded trading monopolies that bled the city dry in exchange for protection. But their greatest weakness wasn't their walls. It was their soul. The city was in the grip of a profound spiritual civil war. For centuries, the Eastern Orthodox Church, centered in Constantinople, and the Roman Catholic Church, centered in Rome, had been in schism. But as the Ottoman threat grew, a desperate series of Byzantine emperors had tried to heal this wound, not for God, but for guns. They pleaded with the Pope for a new crusade, for the armies of Western Europe to save them. The Pope's price was simple: submission. The Orthodox must accept the supremacy of the Pope in Rome. In 1439, at the Council of Florence, the Emperor, John VIII, had agreed. He had, in essence, sold the soul of his church for the promise of a Western army. When he returned to Constantinople, his people were disgusted. A powerful, zealous faction, led by monks and high-ranking nobles, openly declared that they would rather see the turban of the Sultan in the streets of Constantinople than the Pope's mitre. This wasn't just a theological debate, it was a fundamental split in the chain of command. The city that was about to face the greatest army of its time was at war with itself. And then there was the young wolf. On the other side of the border sat an empire that was the exact opposite of Byzantium. It was not old, it was young. It was not weak, it was terrifyingly strong. It was not divided, it was united under the singular will of one man, Sultan Mehmed II. When his father, Murad II, died in 1451, the courts of Europe breathed a sigh of relief. Mehmet was just 21 years old. They saw him as a boy, weak, untested, decadent. They assumed he could be bribed or controlled. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Mehmet was not a simple barbarian. He was a Renaissance prince forged in the crucible of Ottoman power. He was fluent in at least 6 languages, including Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin. He had studied Roman history, Greek philosophy. He could quote Homer. He patronized Italian artists. And he was a military and logistical genius. But above all, he was a man possessed by a single, all-consuming, world-changing obsession. He was not his father. His father had tried to take Constantinople and failed. His father had been cautious. Mehmet was not. From the moment he took the throne, every action, every coin spent, every alliance made was geared toward one goal. The new emperor, Constantine XI, sent panicked messages to Mehmet, reminding him of old treaties. Mehmet's reply was effectively to send back the severed heads of the emperor's ambassadors. The mask was off. The boy Sultan was a wolf, and he was coming for Rome. This brings us to the chessboard of 1453. It was not a simple battle of East versus West. It was a complex, cynical game of geopolitics. The Venetians and the Genoese, who had colonies inside Constantinople, played a double game. They publicly supported the city, but privately sent messages to Mehmet, trying to secure their trading rights after he won. They sent a few hundred men, just enough to say they tried, but not enough to actually change the outcome. The Pope? He sent a Cardinal Isidore of Kiev with a paltry 200 soldiers, the great army of Christendom that the emperor had sold his soul for never materialized. The rest of Europe was busy with its own problems. France and England were exhausted from the 100 Years' War. The German states were a mess of internal conflicts. Constantinople was alone. It was a city of 50,000, defended by 7,000 men, facing an Ottoman army of at minimum 80,000 professional soldiers, backed by over 100,000 irregulars. And those 80,000 were not just any soldiers. They were the Janissaries, the most disciplined, fanatical fighting force on earth. And they were bringing the future. A Hungarian engineer named Orban had first offered his services to the Byzantines. They were too broke to pay him, so Orban went to Mehmed II. Mehmed asked him one question: "Can you build a cannon that will shatter the walls of Constantinople?" Orban replied, "I can build a cannon that will shatter the walls of Babylon itself." Mehmed gave him unlimited resources. The result was the Basilica, a cannon 27 feet long, firing a 1,200-pound stone ball over a mile. It took 60 oxen and 400 men just to move it. The world of 1453 was not a fair fight. It was a collision between the past and the future. And in that collision, caught between the ambition of a sultan who saw himself as the new Caesar and a dying empire obsessed with its own past, was a 16-year-old girl. A girl who, by a quirk of fate, represented the one thing the sultan's cannons couldn't smash, and the one thing he wanted more than all. To understand the Theodora Conspiracy, we must first understand the mind of its chief architect, Mehmed II. Mehmed was not a typical Ottoman sultan. He was not a steppe warrior. He was a product of a new, hybrid, ambitious culture. His mother, Huma Hatun, was a European slave, possibly of Greek or Serbian origin. He was raised with a foot in both worlds, and the world he admired most was the one he was about to destroy. His heroes were not Muslim caliphs. His heroes were Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. He had his court chroniclers read him the campaigns of Alexander every night. He saw himself as the new Alexander, a young genius who would unite East and West. This Alexander complex is crucial. He didn't just want to plunder Constantinople. Plunder was for common warlords. He wanted to possess it. He wanted to become it. In his mind, he was not a Turk conquering a Greek city. He was the true heir of the Roman Empire. This is the Roman obsession. In the 14th century, the title Roman Emperor was still the most potent symbol of legitimate, universal power on earth. The Holy Roman Emperors in Germany claimed it. The Russian Tsars would later claim it. But Mehmed believed he was the rightful heir. How? His logic was simple. Rome's capital was originally Rome. Then, Emperor Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, the new Rome. Therefore, whoever held Constantinople was the Roman emperor. The city was not just a military prize. It was a title. It was a mantle of power. It was legitimacy. This obsession made him a radical. His own old guard advisors, like the powerful Grand Vizier Halil Pasha, were against the plan. They argued it was too risky, too expensive. They were content with the status quo, with Byzantium as a weak, bribe-paying vassal state. Mehmed saw them as old men with no vision. His entire strategy was built on this idea of succession, not just conquest. He didn't just want to be Mehmed the Sultan. He wanted to be Sultan Mehmed, Kaiser-i Rum. This is the key, the only key. A conqueror takes, a successor inherits. A conqueror is a barbarian, a Turk, as the West would call him in their propaganda. A successor is a legitimate ruler, a Caesar, a protector of the people, a new Augustus. This distinction was everything to him. It was the foundation of his entire political future. He wasn't just planning to rule a city. He was planning to rule a new global empire from the throne of the Caesars. His plan after the conquest proves this. When the city fell, he issued proclamations protecting the surviving Greeks. He forced his own soldiers to stop the plunder. He located the radical anti-unionist monk Gennadios, the man who hated the Pope, and appointed him as the new Orthodox Patriarch. Why? It was a masterstroke of political genius. By appointing a patriarch, he won the loyalty of the Orthodox masses. He signaled to them, "The Catholics in the West betrayed you. I, the Sultan, will be your protector." He positioned himself not as the destroyer of their faith, but as its new guardian against Rome. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a successor. But there was one problem. One piece of the Roman legacy he couldn't get by force. One symbol of legitimacy his cannons couldn't break and his armies couldn't capture. A successor inherits. Often, a successor marries the daughter of the old king. He needed a queen. Not just any woman. He needed a Roman queen. And in the dying city, in the imperial palace, there was one. A girl who, in his mind, was the living embodiment of the very legitimacy he craved. A girl who held the last unbroken thread of imperial Roman blood. Now, we must understand the girl, the ghost, Princess Theodora. Who was she? The records are deliberately obscure, a point we will return to. She was not the daughter of the last emperor Constantine, who was childless. She was a member of the extended imperial family, a niece or a cousin. Some sources link her to the Palaiologos dynasty, others to the even more prestigious Kantakouzenos family. The precise genealogy is less important than what she represented. She was, in Byzantine court language, Porphyrogenitos, born in the purple. This was not just a fancy phrase. It was a quasi-mystical, legal, and political concept. To be born in the purple meant you were not just royal. You were born inside the sacred purple chamber of the imperial palace, a room lined with a rare, impossibly expensive purple stone that came from a single quarry in Egypt, a quarry that had been lost for 1,000 years. It meant you were not just a person, you were an artifact, a living symbol of 1,000 years of unbroken divine right to rule. In the 15th century, no other royal family in the world could claim this. The kings of England and France were descendants of brutish warlords by comparison. The Holy Roman Emperor was an elected official. Only the Byzantine emperor and his family were Porphyrogenitos. They were the last true Romans. And Theodora was the last unmarried, high-status Porphyrogenitos princess. She was about 16 years old, and she was unmarried. This is the second crucial fact. In a world where royal women were political assets, married off at 12 or 13 to seal alliances, why was she still available? Some historians suggest she was so valuable she was being held in reserve for a truly game-changing marriage, perhaps to a Western king who might bring an army. Other, more fragmentary sources hinted something else, that she was destined for the church, that she was a deeply pious girl, already promised to God, not to a man. This context is vital. She was not just a girl. She was, in the eyes of her people, one of the last holy symbols of their dying world. And in the eyes of Mehmed the Conqueror, she was the final prize. She was the living, breathing, human symbol of the Roman legitimacy he craved. His cannons could smash the walls. His armies could take the city. His political maneuvering could win over the church. But only she could willingly bridge the gap between the old Rome and the new. Only she could, through marriage, transform him in the eyes of the entire world, from Mehmed the Conqueror to Mehmed the Emperor. She was the key to his Roman obsession. And as the city fell, as her world burned, she became the single most valuable and the single most dangerous person in Constantinople.
April 6th, 1453. The siege begins. For 53 days, the city endures a nightmare. The sound of the great cannons never stops. It is a psychological bombardment as much as a physical one. The walls that had stood for 1,000 years, that had repelled dozens of sieges, begin to crack. Inside the city, there is heroism. The 7,000 defenders fight with the strength of 70,000. They work all night, every night, rebuilding the walls with rubble and wooden stockades. The emperor himself is on the ramparts, fighting, digging, inspiring his men. But there is also division. The anti-unionist faction, led by Grand Duke Notaras, is rumored to be hoarding supplies, perhaps already negotiating a separate peace. Mehmed faces his own frustrations. His fleet cannot bypass the Great Chain. His cannons batter the walls, but the Byzantines miraculously repair them every night. His old guard advisors, led by Halil Pasha, again pressure him to accept a peace treaty, to take a massive bribe from the emperor and go home. Mehmed is at a breaking point. He needs a miracle. So he creates one. In one of the most brilliant and audacious feats of military engineering in history, Mehmed bypasses the chain by going overland. On the night of April 22nd, his men drag 70 ships up a greased wooden road and splash them into the harbor behind the Byzantine defenses. For the city's defenders, this is the moment the world ends. It is a psychological catastrophe. The enemy is now inside their last sanctuary. The end is just a matter of time. On the final night, the city puts aside its differences. A great final Christian service is held in the Hagia Sophia. Catholic and Orthodox, those who supported the Union and those who despised it, stand side by side, praying together for the last time. The Emperor, Constantine XI, is there. He receives communion, asks forgiveness from his people, and then rides out to the walls, to his death. The final assault. It is hell on earth. The defenders fight for hours, but the numbers are too great. The great Genoese commander, Giustiniani, is mortally wounded. His retreat shatters the defenders' morale.
The Janissaries pour through a small unlocked gate, the Kerkaporta. It may have been treason. It may have been an accident. It doesn't matter. They are inside. The city falls. Emperor Constantine XI, the last Caesar, casts off his purple boots and his imperial regalia. He plunges into the oncoming wave of Janissaries and dies anonymously as a common soldier. His body is never definitively found. The Roman Empire is over. According to Islamic tradition, a city that resists conquest is given over to its soldiers for 3 days of plunder. The next 3 days are an indescribable horror. Homes are looted, churches are desecrated, the elderly and infirm are slaughtered. Tens of thousands of civilians are rounded up, chained, and marched to the slave markets. But Sultan Mehmed II has given specific, ironclad orders. His old guard, Halil Pasha, wants to let the city be razed. He is from the old school of steppe warfare. Mehmed refuses. His priority is not destruction. His priority is preservation. He issues orders to his most trusted Janissary commanders. The great buildings, the Hagia Sophia, the Hippodrome, the palaces are to be secured. The city's scholars, artists, and scribes are to be captured alive. They are valuable assets for his new empire. And above all, the surviving members of the imperial family. They are not to be harmed. They are not to be sold as slaves. They are to be brought to him personally. In the chaos of the imperial palace, the search begins. They find high-ranking nobles, like the Grand Duke Lucas Notaras, who is captured and brought before the Sultan. And then, in a private chapel, or perhaps the women's quarters, the sources are again deliberately unclear, they find her. The Janissaries know immediately who she is, or rather, what she is. She is not common plunder. She is not for them. She is the Sultan's prize. She is placed under heavy guard, marched through the streets of her burning, screaming, dying city. She is taken out of the gates to the massive, opulent tent of the 21-year-old man who has just destroyed her world. She is brought before Sultan Mehmed II. And here, history stops. The official records go cold. The chronicles fall silent. We are about to enter the heart of the conspiracy. What happened in that tent was not just a historical event. It was the beginning of a 500-year cover-up. These are the stories history does not want you to know. If you believe these hidden histories, these complex truths need to be brought to light, please take a second to click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We investigate the stories that were deliberately buried. Your support allows us to keep digging. Now, what happened in that tent? What happened in that tent? For 500 years, 3 competing narratives have tried to explain this blank space in history. All 3 are propaganda. All 3 miss the real story. Narrative 1, the Ottoman glorification. This is the official story, written by Mehmed's court historians.
In this version, the brilliant, enlightened Sultan is impressed by Theodora's beauty and noble bearing. He questions her about her family, treats her with honor, and places her under his protection. He is the merciful conqueror, the new Caesar, acting with magnanimity. In this story, she is eventually sent to his harem as a guest or married off to a minor official and lives out her days in quiet comfort. It's a clean, tidy propaganda narrative. It is, almost certainly, a lie. Narrative 2, the Byzantine victimization. This version comes from the traumatized Greek refugees who fled to Italy. In their story, Mehmed is a brutal monster, a scourge of God. He becomes instantly sexually obsessed with Theodora. He drags her to his tent, assaults her, and throws her into his harem as a sex slave. It is a story of pure, unadulterated evil. This narrative served the political goals of the refugees, who were trying to drum up a new crusade from the West. It was a powerful propaganda tool. It is, also, too simple. Narrative 3, the Western romantic fantasy. This is the version that later European playwrights and novelists invented, that the Sultan and the princess fell in a forbidden love, that he was torn between his duty as a conqueror and his passion for her. It's a good story. It has zero basis in reality. The truth, as pieced together from fragmentary reports, diplomatic dispatches, and a terrifying reading between the lines of the sources, is far more complex and far more political. This was not a romantic encounter. It was not, at first, even a sexual one. It was a political negotiation, the most high-stakes negotiation of Mehmed's life. He didn't just want her, he needed her. He needed her to marry him. Think about it from his perspective, his Roman obsession, his desire to be Caesar. A forced conversion and a forced marriage to Theodora, the last Porphyrogenetos princess, would be the ultimate political masterstroke. It would be a dynastic conquest. It would instantly legitimize his claim. It would merge the old Roman bloodline with the new Ottoman one. His children by her would not just be sultans, they would be Roman emperors by blood as well as by conquest. It would send an electrifying message to the 1.5 million Orthodox Christians he had just inherited. I am not your conqueror. I am your new legitimate emperor. The blood of your old rulers now flows in my house. It was the key to his entire imperial project. So he offers her everything. He offers her the position of his primary wife, his Hasaki Sultan. He offers her wealth beyond imagination. He offers to protect her family. He might even, some sources hint at, have offered to let her keep her Christian faith in private, a massive concession. He is not asking her. He is pressuring her. He is a 21-year-old who has just shattered the strongest walls on earth. He is not used to being told no. And Theodora, this 16-year-old girl who has just seen her entire world slaughtered, her family killed or enslaved, her churches desecrated, says no. We don't know why. Perhaps it was her piety, the sources that say she was destined for the church. Marrying the Muslim conqueror would be an eternal sin. Perhaps it was pure, unadulterated evil for the man who had just destroyed her home. Or perhaps it was the last single act of political agency she had left. She knew exactly what she represented. She knew what he wanted, and she knew her refusal was the only weapon she had left. Her no was not just a personal rejection, it was a political rejection. It was the ghost of old Rome looking the new Caesar in the eye and denying his legitimacy. This changes everything. His entire plan, his Roman obsession, is blocked by a teenage girl. He can't kill her. That would make him a barbarian and a tyrant. It would make her a martyr. He can't let her go. She's too valuable. She could be rescued or escape and be married off to a Western prince, creating a rival claimant to his Roman title.
He is trapped, so he keeps her. He places her in his new palace, the Topkapi. She is not a prisoner. She is not a wife. She is a guest, a hostage. And for weeks, perhaps months, as he goes about the business of building his new empire, he continues the negotiation. He continues the psychological pressure. He visits her. He sends her gifts. He sends her threats. He alternates kindness with cruelty. He is a man trying to bend a symbol to his will, and she keeps saying no. And at some point, his patience runs out. His obsession, his frustration, his rage boils over. The negotiation fails. If she will not give him legitimacy, he will take it. The official story, the Ottoman narrative, ends there. She enters the harem and history forgets her. But the real story, the political story, was just beginning. Mehmed's primary goal, the dynastic marriage, the merging of the two empires, had failed. His negotiation for her consent was rejected. His bid for a peaceful, legitimate succession was blocked. This in itself was a political failure. He had failed to win her over. He had failed to get her agreement. He had proven in his own mind that he could not achieve that dynastic victory he craved. But then, the situation becomes a catastrophe. For 470 years, this is where the trail went completely cold. Until the 1920s. After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, its archives were opened to new scholars. A Turkish historian, Halil İnalcık, or others in that first wave of researchers, uncovered a fragment. A private, damaged journal kept by one of Sultan Mehmed's personal physicians. It was not an official chronicle. It was a private medical log. It was never meant to be read by history. The physician describes being summoned in secret to treat a high-status Byzantine captive. The context, the timing, the secrecy, it can only be Theodora. He describes her condition. He uses the 15th century term for severe psychological trauma, melancholia. He notes she is refusing food. He notes she is suffering from the severe physical and mental distress of her confinement. It is the medical log of a person in deep crisis. And then one single, dynasty-shattering entry. The physician notes, she is pregnant. This is the bomb. This is the political crisis. This is the heart of the Theodora Conspiracy. Let's be absolutely clear. This is not a moral crisis for the 15th century court. This is a political and dynastic crisis of the highest possible order. Path A. The Golden Path. Had Theodora agreed to marry Mehmed, this pregnancy would have been a triumph. The child would have been celebrated. It would be the child of two empires, the ultimate symbol of his legitimate succession. It would be the heir to the Roman Empire. Path B, the Red Path.
A child born from an act of violence against an unconverted Christian princess was a disaster. It was not an heir. It was a scandal. It was a rival. Think of the implications. 1. It shatters his entire Caesar narrative. A Caesar inherits. A Caesar protects. A barbarian forces himself on captives. This child is living, breathing proof that he is a Turk warlord, not a Roman emperor. It destroys the entire propaganda campaign he built to win over his new Christian subjects. 2. It creates a bastard pretender. What happens to this child? If it's a boy, he has the blood of the Palaiologos or Cantacuzenos. He is, by Byzantine law, more Roman than Mehmed will ever be. He would become an instant rallying point for every Greek rebel, every Christian king, every Western pope who wants to delegitimize Mehmed's rule. This child is a living, breathing casus belli, a reason for a new crusade. 3. It creates a crisis inside the Ottoman court. What about Mehmed's other wives, his other sons? This child, with its royal Roman blood, becomes a threat to their succession. This pregnancy cannot continue. Or more accurately, Theodora cannot continue. She and her unborn child are now the single greatest threat to the stability of the new Ottoman Empire. A decision is made, a decision so secret it is never written down. Theodora must vanish. Not just from the palace, she must vanish from history. The erasure of Princess Theodora was not a simple act of murder. It was a sophisticated, systematic political cleansing of the historical record. And the most terrifying part? The Ottomans had help. Side 1. The Ottoman erasure. Mehmed's motive is obvious: damage control. The Theodora problem had to be solved. What happened to her? The sources, again, are fragmentary and dark. Possibility 1. The medical solution. The Venetian ambassador's coded letter mentions the Byzantine problem was resolved by medical means. This implies a forced, botched 15th century abortion, a procedure that would have been hideously dangerous. It likely would have killed both her and the fetus. Possibility 2. The convenient death. A Greek monk writing decades later claims she died in childbirth and the infant with her. This is a clean, tidy ending. Too clean. It sounds like a cover story. Possibility 3. The endless prison. Other Ottoman administrative documents show payments for a special guest being maintained at a remote fortified estate in Anatolia, near Bursa. This suggests she was moved from the capital, hidden, and gave birth. The child was likely killed immediately, and she was kept a prisoner for the rest of her life, silenced, guarded, until she died in obscurity. Possibility 4. The unlikely escape. Some Greek refugee stories, whispered for decades, tell of a mad princess matching her description appearing in Italy. Most historians dismiss this as wishful thinking, a fantasy of rescue that never came. We will never know which one is true, and that is the point. The goal was to create a fog, to make her story so uncertain, so contradictory, that no one could ever point to a definitive truth. Mehmed II, the man who wanted to be Caesar, had created his own Claudius moment, a dark, domestic, political secret that would haunt his legacy. He ordered her name stricken from the chronicles. The court physician's records were buried. Any official who knew was silenced. This part of the story is brutal, but it is logical. It is the cold calculus of power. What is not logical is the other side of the conspiracy. Side 2, the Byzantine silence. This is the true tragedy. This is the second and more profound erasure. Why did her own people forget her? The first wave of refugees in the 1450s and 1460s did tell her story. They told the victimization narrative, the story of the monstrous sultan and the pure, raped princess. They used it to try and get money and soldiers from the West. And it failed. No one came. The West was not interested. The Pope had no army. Venice and Genoa were already cutting new trade deals with the barbarian sultan. The refugees were on their own. And what about the Byzantines who stayed? The nobles, the merchants, the priests who were now Mehmed's subjects. They had to survive. Mehmed was building his new empire, and he was using the old Byzantine aristocracy to help him run it. He gave them positions, he gave them land, he let them keep their status, their wealth, in exchange for loyalty. Now, imagine you are one of these surviving Greek nobles in 1455. Your entire survival and the survival of your family depends on not angering the 23-year-old sultan who holds the power of life and death over you. Are you going to be the one to bring up the Theodora problem? Are you going to memorialize the girl whose very existence is a mortal insult to the new emperor? The girl whose story proves he is not a legitimate Caesar, but a brutal rapist? No, you will be silent. You will forget her. You will erase her from your family histories. You will tell your children not to speak her name. You will choose survival over memory. You will choose to save yourselves rather than her. And so a conspiracy of two sides was born. The Ottomans erased her to protect their future, the legitimacy of their new Roman Empire. The Byzantines erased her to protect their present, their fragile, compromised survival within that empire. She was the ultimate inconvenience, the woman in the attic of the New World Order. She was the victim who was too politically dangerous to be remembered by either the villain or the other victims. And so, she vanished. For 500 years, she was a non-person, a historical 404 error. The two great narratives of 1453, the Ottoman story of enlightened conquest and the Byzantine story of noble martyrdom, could finally be written. They were both built on the foundation of her forgotten grave. History is not a record of what happened. It is a record of what we agree to remember. The world Mehmed II built is the world we have today. His Roman obsession was a success. He did become Caesar. His dynasty ruled from the throne of Constantinople for 470 years. His narrative won. The narrative of the Byzantines also won.
in its own tragic way. Their story of a noble, heroic last stand became the dominant memory in the West. Constantine XI is remembered as a hero. But to make those two clean stories work, they had to trade away. Theodora was erased not because she was meaningless. She was erased because she meant too much. She was the one single inconvenient truth that undermined both of their preferred narratives. She was the living proof that the enlightened conqueror's claim to legitimacy was not accepted. She was a living symbol of defiance, a political threat that had to be silenced and erased from the official record. And she was the proof that the noble survivors were compromised, that they were willing to sacrifice the memory of one of their own to secure their place at the new master's table. For 500 years, this conspiracy of silence held. Her story became a ghost, a whisper, a collection of contradictory rumors, until historians pieced together the political logic of her disappearance. She is the ghost that haunts the fall of Constantinople. She is the question mark that hangs over the legacy of Mehmed the Conqueror. Her story forces us to ask, what else have we agreed to forget? Who else has been erased to make our histories clean? For 500 years, her name was a secret. Now, it is a story. If you believe this story must be told, share this investigation. And in the comments, write her name, Theodora. Let's put her name back into the history from which she was stolen.